The blueprint your parents gave you was precise. Get out of the physical world, move behind a screen. The screen was supposed to be the safe side. Marcus Webb arrives at his desk at 7:14 in the morning. Not because anyone asked him to, because he always does. 14 years at the same digital marketing consultancy in Columbus, Ohio. He knows the client roster by heart. He knows which accounts need coddling, which ones just want numbers, and which ones will call on a Friday afternoon and need something written, polished, and sent back by 5. Marcus is good at this. He has always been good at this. His manager told him so last year during his review. That morning, a Tuesday in early 2024, his manager asks him to sit down before the rest of the team arrives. On the conference table, a tablet. On the screen, a content brief, a completed article, a set of ad variations, and a performance projection. All of it generated in 11 seconds. The brief Marcus had been assigned to write that week. The manager doesn't explain it. He just says, "We've been running this in parallel for 3 months." This is not a story about Marcus. What happens when the economy stops paying for the work you spent a decade learning to do and starts paying for something else entirely? Something most people were never told to build. This is Last Shift, where we document what happens when work begins to change. The question this episode answers is not, which jobs survive AI? That is the wrong question. The right question is, where does the structural premium go when raw cognitive output stops being scarce? And the answer is not what the career industry is selling you. Most people, when they hear AI is replacing jobs, picture robots taking physical work. They picture the factory floor, the assembly line, the warehouse fulfillment robot loading boxes onto a shelf. They do not picture the copywriter, the junior analyst, the mid-level project coordinator, the marketing associate, the paralegal doing document review, the graphic designer producing the 3rd variation on a landing page. That's not how it happened. The first wave of real economic displacement didn't hit the factory. It hit the screen. It hit the people who were told that escaping the physical world was the path to security. Digital output, content, code first drafts, data summaries, visual templates, basic research, contract clause generation. These were the products with a marginal production cost that could be driven towards zero almost overnight. What the economy called cognitive work wasn't scarce. It was just slow, and when it stopped being slow, it stopped being valuable. BLS, occupational projections show wage growth in several categories of digital professional work, has stalled or reversed in real terms. Even as demand for the outputs continues to grow, the work didn't disappear. The wage premium for doing it did. The information economy had a structural assumption baked in. Intelligence was scarce enough to command a price. That assumption is now broken in specific, measurable sectors. The move behind a screen advice wasn't wrong for its era. Between 1990 and 2015, the premium for cognitive, digital, information-based work was real. It was documented. It outpaced physical skilled trades by a significant margin for most of that window. A generation of parents watched it happen and told their children accordingly. Go to school, get the degree, work at a desk. The problem is that the scarcity driving that premium was never about intelligence. It was about throughput. Humans processed information at a certain speed. Organizations needed more throughput than they could hire for. The gap between demand and human processing capacity created the wage. The moment that gap closed, the wage structure underneath it became negotiable. That's the mechanism. Not AI takes jobs. The throughput gap closes, and when it closes, the premium migrates. The question is, where does it go? In the BLS's most recent occupational outlook data, the fastest wage growth in the American economy is concentrated in a specific cluster of roles. Electricians working on advanced commercial systems, HVAC technicians certified for modern variable refrigerant flow infrastructure, industrial maintenance mechanics, pipe fitters and plumbers in commercial and industrial settings, elevator installers, wind turbine technicians. Not the entry-level versions, the advanced, licensed, specialized versions. BLS data shows the median annual wage for elevator installers and repairers had already crossed $90,000 before the 2020s automation wave began accelerating. Electricians in commercial and industrial settings were tracking similar trajectories in high-cost markets. In regions with strong union contracts and tight labor supply, experienced journeymen in certain trades were clearing six figures before overtime. This is not an accident. This is a supply and demand story with an unusual feature. The demand side is exploding at exactly the moment the supply side is aging out. The demographic profile of the American skilled trades workforce is not holding. For decades, the cultural machinery of the American high school systematically redirected students away from vocational pathways and toward four-year degrees. Guidance counselors treated the trades as a fallback, not a choice. Parents internalized the stigma. The result? Documented by the Associated Builders and Contractors and the National Center for Construction Education and Research, is a workforce in advanced skilled sectors that skews heavily toward workers over 45. The retirements are already in motion. The replacement cohort is not there. What happens when a specialized skill takes years to acquire? The workforce holding that skill is aging out simultaneously, and demand for that skill is increasing because of infrastructure investment and energy transition. The wage goes up, not slightly, structurally. This is what economists call a supply shock, and it operates in the opposite direction from what the automation narrative describes. The automation story says, technology increases supply by substituting for humans, which drives wages down. That story is correct in digital high-throughput cognitive work. It is incorrect in complex, localized, physical skilled work. Here is the reason, and it matters more than any wage chart. An LLM can write the procedure document for repairing a variable refrigerant flow HVAC system installed in a building with non-standard ductwork, a legacy electrical panel, and a pressurization problem caused by a sealed mechanical room. It can generate that document in 4 seconds. The document is useless without the person standing in the mechanical room, in the building, with the tools. Who has seen this configuration before and knows which sensor to bypass first? The physical world has a property the digital world does not. It has friction. Friction is not a metaphor. Friction is a literal economic barrier. The condensation dripping from the unit, the tight access corridor, the non-standard fitting, the vibration reading that doesn't match the manual, because this unit is 14 years old and has been repaired 3 times. These are not edge cases. These are the normal working conditions of advanced trades work. They cannot be navigated remotely, described in text, or solved by a model that has never been in a room. The industrial robotics story is instructive. The broad deployment of automated robotic systems in manufacturing created a widespread assumption that robotics would make physical skilled labor obsolete. In highly standardized environments, pick-and-place assembly, repetitive stamping, controlled paint environments, that is partially true. But the deployment of industrial robotics also created an enormous new category of specialized maintenance need most people didn't see coming. Robotic systems break. They require calibration. The calibration requires someone who understands both the mechanical components and the control system software. When a robotic arm in a stamping facility develops an intermittent fault in its position sensors, you cannot send a text file to fix it. You need a maintenance mechanic with robotic certification who can walk the line, read the error codes, identify whether the fault is in the sensor, the wiring harness, or the PLC program, and make the repair correctly. Because if they make it incorrectly, the entire production line stops. Downtime in a mid-size American manufacturing plant can reach tens of thousands of dollars per hour. The person who can do that diagnosis is not interchangeable. They cannot be replaced by a chatbot. They cannot be offshored, they cannot be scaled by hiring someone with a general credential. They are a specific person, in a specific building, with a specific skill set developed over years. And the market is paying accordingly. Your skill set has an expiration date, but not every skill set expires at the same time. The displacement that began in the digital information sector did not occur because AI became smarter than humans. It occurred because a specific type of cognitive work, producing structured text, generating variations on existing formats, retrieving and synthesizing information from known sources, turned out to have a throughput bottleneck that could be addressed with current technology. The skill expired not because it became worthless, but because the supply of that skill suddenly became effectively unlimited. The inverse of this is not learn to code. That ship has already moved for entry-level coding. The inverse is identify the work where supply cannot be made unlimited. Where does complexity compound in ways that resist standardization? Where does geography impose a constraint that cannot be engineered away? Where does liability, physical presence, and localized judgment create a structural floor that holds regardless of what the model can generate? That floor is in the physical world. Not universally, not in every trade, but in the advanced, licensed, physically demanding corner of the physical world where the work cannot be digitized, offshored, or performed by a system that doesn't have a body. The irony is the one parents missed entirely. They told their children to escape the physical world, and the physical world, it turns out, was the fortress. But here is where the story becomes more complicated, because the physical arbitrage, as real as it is not sufficient by itself to describe where the new income ceiling lives. The trades create a high floor. They create a premium that is durable and growing. But they also have a ceiling, and that ceiling is set by how many hours one person can physically work and how many simultaneous jobs they can run. The second structural shift in this economy is happening entirely inside the digital world. And it is not the story the AI boosters are telling. And it is not the story the AI doomsayers are telling either. It is quieter than both. There is a class of worker the economy is beginning to pay very differently from its neighbors. These workers are not more technical. They are not prompt engineers in the conventional sense. They are not programmers. In many cases, they are not particularly specialized in any single tool. What they can do is see across an entire production system, hold the architecture in their heads, and direct the components of that system to execute in sequence. They catch the gaps between tools where outputs don't quite align. They make the judgment call that no automation layer can make, and they move the full output forward to a finished state. This is not management in the traditional sense. This is something more precise. Orchestration. The coordination of specialized systems, each genuinely powerful within its specific task, toward a coherent outcome that none of the systems could produce independently. Consider what a digital production workflow actually requires in 2004 and beyond. A client needs a campaign, strategy, research, creative brief, copy variations, visual direction, ad specifications, performance projection, and reporting logic. 5 years ago, that required a team of individual contributors, each with a specialized role. Today, a single operator with the right stack of purpose-built tools can produce the equivalent output. Not because they are more skilled than the team was, but because they can see how the tools need to be linked, what each one does well at its actual boundary, where the handoff requires human judgment, and how to assemble the result into something coherent. The market does not pay for the individual tasks anymore. The AI tools have commoditized the tasks. The market pays for the assembly. The individual contributor is a disappearing economic category in digital work. Not because ICs became bad at their jobs, because the job was atomized. A copywriter who is excellent at writing copy is now competing with every other copywriter who is excellent at writing copy. Plus, every team that uses an AI tool that produces adequate copy for a fraction of the cost. The skill that was valuable is still valuable, but it is no longer scarce. What is scarce is the person who can look at the business problem, understand which specific tools produce the best output for that specific type of problem, build the workflow connecting them, validate the output at each stage, and deliver a finished result with accountability attached. The income caps in the digital economy are not broken by being better at the tool. They are broken by owning the workflow. The operator who runs a full production pipeline, who can take a brief in and return a finished asset out using 5 or 6 layered specialized systems, is not priced like a contractor executing a task. They are priced like someone who owns a system. And the systems that are most valuable are the most specific, the most tailored to a particular output category, and the hardest to replicate because they require judgment in the assembly that the tools themselves cannot provide. This is the conductor's position, not the musician's. The orchestra is made of instruments that each play their part precisely. They are individually excellent. The conductor does not play an instrument. The conductor hears the whole, directs each section, adjusts the tempo when a section falls behind, and is responsible, personally, finally, for whether the performance is coherent. Remove a violin from a modern orchestra, and the performance continues. Remove the conductor, and the performance becomes a rehearsal. The digital economy is forming a new labor structure. At the bottom, commoditized task execution, handled by AI tools at near zero marginal cost. In the middle, a collapsing category of individual contributors whose skill value is real but whose supply is no longer constrained. At the top, a thin, highly compensated layer of people who hold the architecture of systems in their heads, and whose judgment creates the coherence that turns tool output into business value. The market never announces this transition. It just starts paying one layer much less and another layer much more. And most people only notice when they are already on the wrong side of the line. The job didn't disappear. The value moved to the layer above it. There is a third position in this structure, and it is the oldest one. It predates AI. It predates software. It predates the industrial era. And it is the one that commands the highest price of all. Not because of skill, not because of throughput, not because of system management. Because of a single, ancient, irreplaceable economic function. Being the person with their name on the line when something goes wrong. The premise requires a moment to land correctly. Because it sounds, at first, like a description of management. It is not. The difference is structural. And it is not subtle. An algorithm can generate a bridge design. Current structural engineering AI tools can process load calculations, stress tolerances, material specifications, and environmental constraints faster and with fewer arithmetic errors than any human team. The output is technically competent, sometimes technically superior to what a human team would produce in the same time. But somewhere in the chain between that AI-generated blueprint and the moment workers begin pouring concrete, a licensed professional engineer signs the document. That signature does not validate the math. The math can be validated by software. That signature does something more fundamental in the American legal and business system. It attaches a human identity, a professional license, a liability exposure, a career on the line, a bonded financial stake, to the claim that this design is safe, correct, and executable. If the bridge fails, the algorithm does not appear before a regulatory body. The algorithm does not lose its license. The algorithm is not named in a lawsuit. The engineer is. That accountability structure is not a bureaucratic formality. It is a load-bearing element of the entire professional services economy. The compensation at the top of structural engineering, financial auditing, corporate law, and critical infrastructure management is not compensation for doing the cognitive work faster than AI. AI is already faster. The compensation is for absorbing the consequence, for being the human whose personal and professional survival is at stake in the outcome. For putting their license, their bonded liability, their professional reputation behind the claim that the output is correct. This is not incidental to how these fields work. It is the mechanism by which society delegates trust to outcomes it cannot verify independently. Society cannot audit every bridge load calculation. Society cannot review every financial statement. Society cannot read every contract. What society does is require that a specific, licensable, accountable human being certify these things, and then punish that human being when the certification proves false. The system cannot be sued. That is not a philosophical observation. It is a legal fact with enormous economic consequences. When a financial audit firm sends a team to verify a corporation's books, the partners signing those audit opinions are not paid to be fast. Software has been faster than human auditors for years on the data processing side. The verification algorithms, the anomaly detection systems, the cross-referential ledger audits, they have been running in audit software suites for over a decade. The senior partners are not paid for what the software does. They are paid for what happens when the software is wrong. They are paid for the moment the client's CFO gets on a call and says, "We have a problem," and there needs to be a human being on the other end who can be held responsible for what was certified. That accountability has a price, and that price has been going up. Not because auditing became more complex on the computation side, but because the liability exposure underneath the signature grew. As the outputs AI can generate become more technically sophisticated, the human certifying those outputs becomes more exposed, not less. The smarter the tool, the higher the stakes when it fails. And the higher the stakes when it fails, the more expensive the human willing to put their name on the outcome. This is the inversion most career advice completely misses. The assumption is that as AI becomes more capable, the human premium decreases, because the human is doing less. The opposite is true in accountability-driven fields. The human premium increases because the human is absorbing more risk per signature. The tool gets better. The exposure grows. The price of the signature rises. The person paid to take the blame is not a figurehead. They are a financial instrument. Consider what happens in corporate law when an acquisition goes sideways. The deal lawyers who structured the agreement, negotiated the representations and warranties, and drafted the indemnification provisions. They are not named in the lawsuit because they did the legal analysis. They are named because they signed off on the legal analysis being complete and correct. Their malpractice exposure is the price of admission to the role. Their bar license is collateral. Their professional survival is the guarantee that makes the signature meaningful. AI legal research tools can now process case law, identify precedent, flag jurisdictional conflicts, and draft clause language faster and more comprehensively than a team of associates working overnight. Law firms are using them. What is also not in dispute is that no court, no regulatory body, no counterparty to a transaction, and no board of directors will accept a contract certified by an algorithm. The signature on the final document belongs to the attorney. The liability travels with the signature. That is not an antiquated formality waiting to be disrupted. It is a structural requirement of the system. You cannot outsource accountability to a system that cannot be punished. The architecture is identical across professional services at the highest compensation levels. The structural engineer signs the drawing. The licensed CPA signs the audit opinion. The attorney signs the opinion letter. The financial advisor with fiduciary designation signs the investment policy statement. The pharmacist signs off on the prescription fill. The surgeon signs the consent documentation and performs the final human judgment call in the operating room. The common thread is not expertise. AI has absorbed a large fraction of the expertise. The common thread is liability. They are the named party. They are the one who loses something real when it goes wrong. And in an economy where AI-generated output is proliferating faster than the regulatory frameworks designed to verify it, the premium for the human who can verify, certify, and absorb consequence is not compressing. It is expanding. Enterprise deals make this visible in a form that doesn't usually appear in discussions about AI and labor. When two large organizations negotiate a significant contract, a long-term supply agreement, a joint venture structure, a merger of any complexity, the AI tool can model the terms. It can run scenario analysis, generate draft language, flag risk exposure based on historical deal outcomes, and propose structure faster than any deal team. But at the table where the final terms are negotiated, the thing that makes the agreement hold is not the quality of the AI-generated analysis. It is the reputational collateral of the humans in the room. The deal closes because the lead negotiators on each side have a track record, a professional reputation, and a personal accountability to both parties that creates the trust necessary to move through ambiguity. When a term is contested, when a representation is unclear, when a carve-out needs to be agreed on at the last minute, in a way that neither legal team fully modeled, what resolves it is the willingness of a human being with something to lose to say, "I'll take responsibility for this interpretation. The algorithm cannot make that offer. It has nothing to lose." This is the oldest economic function in the world. Before contracts, before courts, before professional licensing boards, the mechanism was identical. Someone with standing, reputation, assets, community position, something real to forfeit, guaranteed the transaction. That guarantee had a price. That price was how professional services were always structured. AI did not eliminate this function. AI made it more valuable because AI increased the volume of technically sophisticated outputs that need a human guarantee behind them. The skill set that doesn't expire is not the one that produces the output. It is the one that signs for the output. 3 professional domains make this visible now in a form that is measurable and observable. First, critical infrastructure engineering, civil engineers, structural engineers, and electrical engineers working on power grid expansion projects, bridge rehabilitation programs, and commercial building permitting are seeing compensation and demand increase in licensed senior roles, even as the computational portion of their work is substantially automated. The engineering software produces the models. The licensed professional engineer stamps the drawings. The stamp is what makes the project buildable. The stamp requires a human license, a human bond, and a human who can lose both. Second, corporate auditing and compliance. The major accounting firms using AI-assisted audit tools have not reduced the number of signing partners on major audit engagements. In some cases, they have increased the number of licensed CPAs at the review level because the complexity and breadth of what the tools are flagging has created more exception items requiring human professional judgment and documented sign-off. The Public Company Accounting Oversight Board does not certify algorithms. It certifies individual licensed accountants. The license is the product. Third, financial advice under fiduciary obligation. The proliferation of AI-driven financial planning tools, robo-advisors, and algorithmic portfolio management has not displaced the human financial advisor in the institutional space. It has bifurcated the market. At the lower end, robo-advisory tools manage rule-based portfolios with minimal human involvement at dramatically lower cost. At the upper end, clients with complex situations, estate planning, alternative assets, tax loss harvesting across multiple entity structures, beneficiary arrangements, are paying significant ongoing fees specifically because they need a named human being who is legally obligated to act in their interest and personally exposed if they do not. That fiduciary obligation is what the algorithm cannot carry. It is what the human fee buys. A reasonable observer might note that AI systems are improving rapidly enough that accountability frameworks will eventually be updated to accommodate algorithmic certification. That regulatory environments will evolve to allow algorithm-signed documents, algorithm-certified audits, algorithm-executed fiduciary obligations. That observation is not irrational. Regulatory frameworks do evolve. But they evolve slowly. They evolve after failures, not before them. The history of professional licensing in the United States is a history of liability expanding after disasters, not contracting. After structural failures, licensing requirements tighten. After audit failures, sign-off requirements increase. After financial crises, fiduciary obligations are codified more strictly, not relaxed. The structural architecture is self-reinforcing, because the failures that prompt regulatory response create political and institutional pressure in exactly one direction. So here is what these three sections reveal when you hold them together. The physical arbitrage is not about escaping to blue-collar work. It is about understanding that complexity plus friction plus locality creates a permanent economic floor in any domain where the work cannot be digitized, offshored, or completed by a system that isn't physically present. That floor is rising. It will continue to rise as the demographic clock in the specialized trades keeps ticking and infrastructure investment keeps expanding demand. The conductor's gambit is not about learning prompt engineering as a skill. It is about understanding that the economic premium in digital work has migrated from task execution to system architecture. The person who owns the workflow, who can hold the full production architecture in their head, assemble the right tools, validate the handoffs, and deliver a coherent output, is not priced as a contractor. They are priced as a system owner. That distinction is the entire difference, and the trust premium is not about finding a safe bureaucratic job, where accountability is vague. It is about identifying the specific domains where a human signature still carries legal, financial, and reputational weight that an algorithm cannot carry, and deliberately building a career in that signature position. These are not three separate strategies. They are three expressions of the same structural truth. When AI commoditizes throughput, the premium migrates to whatever AI cannot commoditize. And the things AI cannot commoditize are friction, architecture, and accountability. The workers most exposed right now are not the ones in factories. The workers most exposed are the ones who were told the screen was the safe side, and who built careers producing structured text, processing known information, generating variations on existing formats, completing tasks where the output is digital, and the process is documentable, and the skill, however real, is now replicable at mere zero marginal cost. These workers did nothing wrong. They followed the correct advice for their era. But the era changed, and the mechanism driving their wage premium, throughput scarcity, dissolved. Not gradually. In about 3 years. This is not a coincidence. It is structural. The technology was designed to address exactly the throughput bottleneck that was creating their wage premium. The jobs that survive this design are the ones where the throughput bottleneck cannot be solved by processing speed alone. BLS occupational projections through 2033 show the fastest wage growth and lowest displacement risk concentrated in roles with three shared characteristics. They require physical presence and localized judgment. They carry professional liability, or direct accountability, or they require human-to-human trust that legal or institutional frameworks require to be grounded in a named individual. The roles with the highest disruption risk share the opposite profile: digital output, documentable process, no localized physical requirement, compensation based primarily on throughput. The pattern holds across industries. It held through the offshoring wave of the 2000s, when call center jobs, data processing roles, and back-office administration migrated toward lower-cost labor markets, while roles requiring physical presence or licensed accountability remained. It held through the software-driven efficiency push of the 2010s, when document management, basic financial reporting, and routine legal discovery tasks were automated, while senior review, expert testimony, and fiduciary sign-off remained. The technology changes. The migration pattern is identical each time. And yet, the assumption of normalcy holds. Most workers, right now in roles that match the high displacement profile, are not recalibrating. They are waiting to see how it develops. They are hoping the automation stops somewhere before their specific role. They are treating this as a cyclical disruption rather than a structural one. It is now late 2025. Marcus Webb is not at that consultancy anymore. He left 6 months after that Tuesday morning conversation. Not fired. The company restructured around the new system, and his position was eliminated in a round that also took out 4 other mid-level content roles. He found work after a longer search than he expected. A different kind of work. He is now 3 months into an apprenticeship program with a commercial electrical contractor in Ohio, working toward a journeyman license. He is making less money right now than he was before. He will make more money in 3 years than he would have made staying on the same track. He knows this because he ran the numbers. He knows the labor market data for licensed commercial electricians in the Columbus Metro. He knows the demographic profile of the workforce he is entering. He knows that the building automation systems he is learning to install, the intelligent HVAC control networks, the power management infrastructure in data centers, the electrical backbone of a region adding commercial square footage faster than the licensed workforce can support, require exactly the combination of physical presence, localized judgment, and embodied skill that has no throughput bottleneck an algorithm can close. He also learned something he didn't expect. That his years of thinking about client workflow, production systems, and output quality were not wasted. They transferred into a different kind of value. The contractor he works for needed someone who could talk to clients, translate technical requirements into project specifications, and manage the communication layer between the field crew and the project manager. Marcus could do that without being taught. The blend was something no apprenticeship program trained for, because the trades in the digital world had been separated for so long that the combination was rare. Now it is expensive. The technology wasn't designed to betray him. It was designed to be faster, and being faster meant the work he was doing was no longer a bottleneck. And when the bottleneck closed, the wage underneath it became negotiable, and the shift arrived. He didn't see it as loss at the end. He saw it as the first time in his career he understood exactly why he was being paid. Not because he was fast, because he was present, because he was accountable. Because the building couldn't be wired by a document. Here is the question this episode leaves you with. If the premium in the modern economy has migrated to friction, architecture, and accountability, then the most dangerous career position is the one that has none of the 3. No physical friction, no system-level architecture responsibility, no named accountability for the outcome. Ask yourself honestly, if you removed your name from your current role and replaced it with an AI-generated output, would anyone be harmed? Would anyone be liable? Or would the output simply be cheaper? That question is not rhetorical. It is the exact question the companies employing you are already running through their own analysis. Subscribe, because the next shift is already in motion, and the industry it hits might be yours. The last shift never begins where people expect. Now you know where it starts.